Hi, I'm Eric Siegel with ericstrains.com and welcome to Eric's Trains episode 48. Okay, it's August of 2014 and there's a lot of stuff going on with the layout right now. This time of year is usually pretty busy. I've got a lot of stuff to show you and a lot of stuff to talk about, so let's go ahead and get started. So first on the agenda, let's talk about the upcoming open house for the layout. The 2014 Piedmont Pilgrimage Tour of Atlanta and North Georgia area train layouts is coming this fall. The tour is sponsored by the local NMRA chapter, and it gives a chance for people to see some of the really cool train layouts in the Atlanta and North Georgia area. The tour is free of charge, it's open to the public. It typically consists of 70 to 80 train layouts of all scales, and they hold it over a series of weekends in October and November, and they do it by geography so that each weekend the layouts on the tour are in the same general area of town. Now my open house is going to be on Saturday, October 18th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So if you're going to be in the Atlanta area on that weekend and you want to see the layout, come on and stop by. It's free of charge, it's open to the public, and we always have a lot of fun. And while you're here, check out some of the other layouts on the Piedmont Pilgrimage Tour as well. For more information, including driving directions, check out the Piedmont Pilgrimage website at www.piedmontpilgrimage.com. The next thing I want to talk about is the new live webcams on the layout. I've installed 3 new live webcams on the layout. There's one here in the main room, there's one in the Colorado room, and there's one back in the Carolina room. I may eventually install a 4th camera in the hallway room, but for right now there are 3 live webcams, and so far people seem to really be enjoying them. They get to see me work on the layout, sometimes I run trains, and sometimes I talk to the camera about topics related to our hobby. So if you haven't seen them yet, feel free to check them out. You can find them on my website at www.ericstrains.com, or you can access them directly by going to webcams.ericstrains.com. Now, having the live webcams has been a learning experience for me because it's taken time to try to figure out exactly how I want to use the webcams and what people expect from them. So I've already talked about this on my Facebook page, but I want to take a minute to lay out some simple ground rules for the webcams just to answer some questions before you have to ask them. First of all, the webcams are not a perfect technology. They work fine most of the time, but just like any other technology out there, sometimes they have their problems. So if you go to view the webcams during normal hours and they're not working, don't worry about it. Just come back later and chances are they'll be working. Also, the webcams do not work very well on mobile devices. So if you're trying to view them on an iPhone or an iPad or an Android device, you probably won't have much success. The best way to view them is on a real computer. Now, I am working on an Eric's Trains iPhone app that will allow you to view the cameras and view my videos and all sorts of other stuff, but that won't be done for a while. So until then, the best way to view the webcams is on a real computer. Secondly, the webcams are not on 24 hours a day. I've posted the hours of operation on the webcam page of my website. So if you go to view the webcams during hours outside of the operational windows, you won't see anything. All you'll get is a message that says the camera is offline. Now, the webcams are in color, they have sound, and they have the capability of HD video. However, for bandwidth reasons, I typically only have the main room set to HD, and then the back rooms are normally set to standard resolution. The webcams also have an infrared night vision feature, so if you tune in to watch the webcams and you see a black and white image, don't worry, there's nothing wrong. What you're seeing is a dark layout room that's lit up with night vision. When I leave the layout and I'm not doing anything, I turn all the lights off, it gets very dark down here, the night vision kicks in, and you get that black and white image. So when you do see the black and white image, it means there's nothing going on. Also, from time to time, I will mute the audio or completely shut off the cameras during normal hours. I do this for privacy reasons, so if you tune in and there's no audio or there's no video during normal hours, don't worry, most of the time that's on purpose. Finally, keep in mind that the webcams are not a guaranteed show. The best way to think about it is that you're looking through a window into the layout. And so on some days, you're going to see a lot of stuff going on. I might be working on the layout, I might be running trains, I might be talking to the webcams, and then on other days, there's going to be absolutely nothing going on. Believe it or not, I do have a life outside of trains. I've got a family and I have a regular day job. So whether or not you're going to see a lot of stuff going on with the layout depends on the day I've had and my schedule. So when it comes to the webcams, there are definitely some days that are better than others. So anyway, if you have not checked out the webcams yet, feel free to join us. Again, you can find them on my website at www.ericstrains.com or go directly to them at webcams.ericstrains.com. And by the way, the open house on October 18th will be visible on the webcams. It won't be as good as being here in person, but if you can't make it, it's better than nothing. Alright, so enough of that. Now let's talk about layout progress. I've got a lot of stuff going on with the layout right now, so let's go ahead and take a look. So an area of the layout that has seen a lot of work lately is right here. I'm in the hallway room, and the track where it goes into this tunnel and into the Carolina room, and then this curve in the Carolina room, that little siding there, and then back into this tunnel out here, back into the hallway room and to the bridge. Basically all of the track from here through the Carolina room and back into here has been completely ripped out and redone. And you can kind of see where I did it. Here is the weather track that was there before, and now I've got nice shiny brand new track there. And I've explained this in previous videos, but the reason I redid all this track was to fix a nagging problem with this curve here in the Carolina room. As I've explained before, when I first built the layout, I tried to get this curve as wide as I could without going overboard, and it worked, but I had to use a piece of 045 track, a piece of 054 track, and a piece of 063 track in what was otherwise an 072 curve. And the reason I did it was because I was running up against the studs in the walls. So I tried to get it as wide as I could, and that's the best I could do at the time. And it worked because at the time I was not into steam engines and I didn't have any big, huge diesels. I had ST70s and ES44s and stuff like that. They all made it through the curve just fine. So for my needs at that time, it worked perfectly fine. But as I got into steam engines and larger engines like the UP Veranda and the MTH Amtrak Turbo Train and so forth, those bigger engines, the big articulated steam engines and so forth, had trouble making it through this curve. It wasn't a huge problem because I had plenty of engines that could make it through the curve, but it was a nagging problem, and so finally I decided to bite the bullet and do something about it. So I ripped all of this out. Both of these tunnels were ripped out, and I redid all of the track. So the track now moves a little bit further to the right in that tunnel and a little bit further to the left in this tunnel, thereby widening the curve. Now, it's still not perfect because I'm constrained by the studs in the walls. They dictate how wide the curve can be. And I was able to get it a little bit wider. I had to reroute some wiring in the walls for the house, and I had to file away a little bit of a stud in right there in that tunnel, but I got it a lot wider than it was. And so now the 045 piece is gone, the 054 piece is gone. I believe there's still one piece of 063 in there. So it's not quite 072, but it's much closer than it used to be, and therefore many more of my engines can make it through this curve. There are still a handful that are going to have trouble getting through this curve. I'm just going to have to live with that until I build my next layout later on down the road, because that's as wide as I'm going to get it without destroying a door frame or removing a stud, which I'm just not going to do. Now, you may be asking, Eric, why didn't you just do this when you first built the layout? That seems kind of silly. Well, there are a couple of reasons. First of all, when I first built the layout, I knew I was going to have to go through the walls with the trains, but I wanted to do as little damage as possible, so I really didn't want to reroute any electrical wiring or modify any of the studs in the walls if I didn't have to. And at the time, I didn't have to, because all of the diesels that I had at the time could make it through the curve with no problem. Like I said, it wasn't until I started getting larger engines that this became a problem. And so it's sort of like if you were to ask someone who was building a highway who was expanding the highway from 2 lanes to 6 lanes, you could say, well, hey, why didn't you make it a 6-lane highway in the first place? And you'd get the same answer that you're getting from me, and that is that we didn't have to build a 6-lane highway because there was no need. And at the time when I first built this curve, I didn't have a need for anything wider. It was wide enough to get all my engines through at the time, and so I left it as it was. And then, like I said, as I got larger and larger engines, that's when it became a problem and necessitated doing something about it, which I finally did. So the work is all done. I haven't reballasted the siding yet, but all of the rest of the work is done. The signals are working again and everything. So it's looking really good, and most of my engines can now make it through. Like I said, there are still a handful that can't make it through. The MTH Amtrak Turbo Train cannot, because that really requires 072 curves. The Lionel Vision Line Challenger barely makes it through. Technically speaking, it can make it through, but it's really, really close. I'm assuming that the new Vision Line Big Boy will not be able to make it through because it's probably longer than the Challenger. But it's okay, because the few engines that I have that can't make it through this curve right now, I can still run them in the main room, on the bottom loop, and on the upper level loop. So it's really not that big of a deal. And percentage-wise, I'm okay, because I did a count of all of my motorized units last week, including all of my engines and speeders and trolleys and all that stuff. And I've got around 150 pieces. So for 3 or 4 of my engines to not be able to make it through this curve, that's a pretty good percentage, and so I'm really not worried about it. Anything that can't make it through this curve, I can still run in the main room. It's not the end of the world. And some of those trains that can't make it through, I wouldn't normally run on the main loop anyway, like the Amtrak Turbo Train, because it's a small train. It would kind of be wasting the space of the main loop to run such a small train, so I normally wouldn't run that. And another thing that can't fit through really well is the MTH Orient Express. The engine goes through fine, but the Orient Express passenger cars are larger than Americano scale. They're 143, and those have a hard time making it through this curve. But again, that's something that I wouldn't normally run on an everyday basis, so it's okay. I can live with it, and I'll just have to wait till I build my next layout for them to make it through all of the curves on my layout. And you know, this just goes to show that there is no such thing as a perfect layout. For those of you out there trying to build a layout or thinking about building a layout, you don't have to shoot for perfection. Every layout has its problems. I don't care what anybody tells you, there is no such thing as a perfect layout. The best layouts in the world have their problems, just like mine. So the fact that a few engines can't make it through this curve is no big deal. I'm not worried about it. Most of my engines can make it through now, so I'm really happy with the work, and I'm going to move on to something else. Now, this renovation work is a good example of how the new live webcams can be a lot of fun, but also a very useful tool. I got the first live webcam just before I started doing all of this renovation work, and I think people really had a lot of fun watching me rip all of this out and put it back together. I enjoyed getting questions from the viewers. So if you're looking for a way to see how the layout comes together and to see how things are done, the webcams are the perfect way to do that. I'm not always doing work on the layout, so there are times when you're going to look at the webcams and there's nothing going on at all. But when I am working on the layout, you'll get to see it happen in real time. Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering what this red Coca-Cola box is all about, this is a mini electric cooler that I bought from Home Depot. I got it for about 30 bucks, and I use it to keep my drinks cold when I'm down here working on the layout. It's not a standard refrigerator. It doesn't use Freon or have a compressor, and it doesn't need to be run 24 hours a day because this is a thermoelectric cooler slash heater. So you just run it when you need it. So what I'll do is when I come down to work on the layout at night, I'll bring down a few cold drinks from the fridge upstairs. I'll put them in here and turn it on, and it keeps those drinks nice and cold for the rest of the night. And then when I'm done working on the layout and I'm ready to go to bed, if there are any drinks left inside, I'll take them out and take them back upstairs, and then I'll just turn it off. It also has a heater function if you want to keep something warm, but I just use it to keep my drinks cold, and it works just fine. Also here in the Carolina room, I've done some work over here. I've added a bunch of trees. I probably added about 24 trees, although you really can't tell because trees get swallowed up by a layout this size. I mean, I could add 36 trees to the layout and you wouldn't notice at all. But I did add quite a few trees over here. I'm not done yet, but it does look better. On this spot here in the main room, I'm thinking about doing some new work, and I got the idea for this work one night when I was watching the live webcam, because this spot is right in front of the main room webcam, and I thought, you know, I need to add something cool in this area. So what I think I'm going to do is add an abandoned track coming off of this track and going over here and then disappearing into an old abandoned tunnel. So the track will come all the way over here. It won't quite touch this track. It'll be as if there used to be a switch here and then it was removed. And so the track will come over here and disappear into an old tunnel, and I'll distress the tunnel and the track to make them look abandoned. And I think that'll add some nice character to the layout. I've always thought there's something fascinating about abandoned tracks and especially abandoned tunnels. You know, it's like, where does it go? What did it used to be used for, and why is it abandoned? And so I'm going to have that right here when people come into the layout room, and I think it'll be pretty cool. I'll probably add some figures of some teenagers or somebody hanging out in the old abandoned tunnel. That'll be kind of neat. And I'm hoping to have that work done before the open house in October. Also here in the main room, I've added some more yard lights to the yard. I started off a few months ago by adding that light tower right there. And then over the last few days, I've added 5 more light towers. We've got 2 right there, another 2 there, and then another one all the way down here. So we've got a total of 6 right now, and there are many more to come in the near future. And as you can see, with the lights turned off, it's starting to look pretty cool. Over here on the opposite side of the main room, I've started to lay down some of the streets in what will eventually be a town-like area of the layout. So you can see I've started laying down the flex bed road bed material, which will eventually be paved and be the streets of the town. There will be a grade crossing right there. I'm not quite sure what'll happen down there, but I'll figure it out. So it's starting to come together. I don't think this will be done in time for the open house, but hopefully sometime within the next year, this will start to look somewhat like a town. Back here in the Colorado room, I've also added something new, and it's up here on the ceiling. In between the globe light and the track lighting there is that black stick, and that is a new antenna that I've installed. It's an extension antenna for the Lionel Legacy command system, because here in the back rooms the Legacy signal gets pretty weak and sometimes it's hard to control the trains. And so I finally decided to do something about it and install an extension antenna to help improve reception. So what I did is here in the main room where the main Legacy antenna is located, I installed it in the ceiling. What I did is I bought a splitter off of Amazon, and then I also bought a length of cable and a second antenna from Amazon, and I ran that cable all the way to the back room through the ceiling to the Colorado room and installed a second antenna back here, and it has dramatically improved reception. It's not perfect, but it's much, much better than it was before. And I will probably install a third antenna back here in the Carolina room to further improve reception. Also here in the Colorado room, I've added some more trees, although you can hardly tell because, like I said, trees really get swallowed up by a layout very easily. And I've also started to repaint the tunnel portals a different color. The original color is right there on that tunnel portal, and that color sort of matches the tunnel portals on the rest of the layout, but since this is set in a different part of the country than the rest of the layout, I want the tunnel portals to look a little bit different. And so I finally settled on a sand type color, and that's what I've started to paint those portals, although they do need one more coat before they'll be done. The last thing I want to show you is some progress on the shelving situation here in the layout room. We're in the main room, and this is a new display case that I just installed today, as a matter of fact. It's so new that I haven't even put any trains on it yet. I built this myself with wood that I bought at Home Depot. This type of wood is called Select Pine. So it's pine, but it's nicer than your average pine. You know, I would have liked to use a hardwood like oak or something, but that's a lot more expensive and This is nice. It's got a nice grain to it, so it'll do. It cost about $100 or so by the time it was all said and done, and I think it looks pretty nice. It's nothing fancy. I just kind of threw it together and then put some stain and some polyurethane on it, so it's nothing fancy, but it'll hold a bunch of trains. It should hold about maybe somewhere between 22 and 25 engines. I don't have enough engines to fill up this display case right now, but I built it in anticipation of some engines that will be coming in the near future because Lionel and MTH will be shipping a lot of their new trains as fall approaches, so it'll be nice to have a nice display case to put them in when they arrive. Now, just like this display case over here, I still need to add plexiglass doors to the front of this thing in time for the open house in October because, as I've said before, when you've got display cases that are close to the floor, you want to put plexiglass on the front so that children don't accidentally damage the trains while they're here for the open house, because that would be kind of an awkward conversation to have with a parent. Hey, you owe me $600 because your kid just tipped over this engine. I don't want to have that conversation, so that's what the plexiglass doors are all about. That's why I put one on the SD70 case over here. I need to redo the plexiglass door on the SD70 case because I did 1/8 inch plexiglass originally, and that was too thin. It started warping, and so eventually I'll replace it with 1/4 inch. But it's okay for now, but just one of these days I'm going to replace it with 1/4 inch plexiglass, and of course these new display cases will have 1/4 inch plexiglass to begin with. But on this display case, I'm going to do the doors 50-50, so there'll be 2 doors of equal size and the dividing line down the middle, and then hinges on each door. On this display case, I'm going to do it a little bit off-center because I've got the stairwell to contend with. So if I made the first door on the left here 50% of the display case, it would be too wide to open up all the way. It would hit the handrail over here. So what I'm going to do is the left-hand door will be about 40% of the size of the display case, and then the right-hand door will be about 60% of the display case. So that way I'll be able to open up both doors without any interference from the handrail or the wall. Aside from progress on the layout, I've got several videos that are currently in the works. The next product review video will be for the Lionel Southern Pacific AC-12 cab forward, and then after that I'll be doing a review on the MTH Pennsy GG1 freight set. And then I've also got a big video in production that's part of a new series called Eric's Trains on the Road. Hopefully you guys will find that a lot of fun. Look for that in the next month or so. But for now, that's it. I'm Eric Siegel, and I'll see you next time.